I'm going to plant up my 2 big containers which are in front of the summer house. They take 4 pots each, and I fancy that I want them to look all the same. I'm going to use 4 different bulb varieties in each pot, but 4 pots together, flanked on either side, so 8 in total, is going to give me a really dramatic display. And I'm going to use my old Faithfuls, and I'll quickly run you through them now. Purrissima, for me, flowers first in my garden. It flowers so early at the end of March that it actually coincides with the hyacinths. So I make sure that I never plant the 2 together, because the tulip will overpower the quite expensive hyacinths. You'll remember, I've reserved the hyacinths to go in the big pot with the late double tulips. So the hyacinths are allowed to shine. Then as soon as they're starting to go over, those tulips will take over. So with Purrissima, I'm going to put in Exotic Emperor, and it's another early variety, but it's kind of a white double, like a semi-double, and it's got a little bit of green veining on it. It's really, really beautiful. Flowers just a tiny bit later, so Purrissima will still be flowering, but that flower's just a tiny touch later. So I need to have the Purrissima for the earliest flowers, and then this white double comes in to keep it company. So my first 5 bulbs are in and spaced out beautifully. The next 5 have gone in all the gaps. It doesn't really matter which layer your tulips go in. All I look at is the eventual height. So the ones that are tallest, put in the lower levels of your compost. Then we're going to put a nice layer of my homemade compost on the top. Next 5 are going to be something called Apricot Beauty, because otherwise the pot's a bit white. So I want to have a little bit of colour, but I don't want too much, because white and spring go really well together, don't they? And finally, just to make the pot last a little bit longer, I'm going to put in Spring Green, which is white and green. It's quite similar to Exotic Emperor, but it flowers later. So these flowers are going to come up, and they're all, at one point they will all be blooming together, but the Purrissima will be starting to go over. But what I found is if you stagger the bloom times, it makes the whole pot look really good. So even though Purrissima would be starting to get on their last legs, the fact that you've got the brand new fresh spring green actually disguises that completely. Some more homemade compost, twiggy bits and all. There we go. Then finally, a couple of scoops of our sterilised compost just on the very top. Can, if we want to, absolutely put some early flowering crocuses or some of those February flowering irises. Just check the packet to make sure you get the right ones. You could always put those on the top of the pot to start the blooming even earlier, but it's quite expensive. Bulbs do add up quite quickly, so I'm pretty pleased with my selection, and those 4 are going to look absolutely smashing. I've actually, in previous years, before I had all of my favourites, when I was trialling everything, I went a bit too far, and I started with the crocuses and the irises, and then we had the hyacinths, and then we had the tulips, and then the mid-season tulips, and then the late tulips, and then I put in anemones. Big mistake. Don't put anemones in those pots. The foliage is far too delicate, so they get overpowered by the tulips, and they don't start flowering outside until May. And by that time the pot's well over. So that was a step too far. Plant your anemones up separately in a separate container, and then you've only got that one container to worry about if we get a late frost and it's already blooming, and you can just tuck that inside your back door if you need to. So quick before, this is what the tulips now look like. Super tragic. So Neil's going to just very quickly whip them out, and we'll swap them over for the dahlias. I hope you're having a lovely afternoon. Neil is fixing the shed roof and I am trying to capture these anemone. They're blue and white. I'm trying to capture their best side.